This is Johnny Dosco. Stay tuned for another Score Sheet podcast. Holy Kadelka!
Score Sheet Tom here with your Week 4 Fantasy Football Preview. First up, let's take a look at some of the guys you'll want to have in your starting lineup. The New England Patriots are coming off a stunning loss in Buffalo where they blew a 21-point lead and Tom Brady had 4 interceptions. This week, the team comes out to the West Coast to face a Raiders team that has been playing very well. But one thing they don't do is defend much against the pass. Expect Woodhead to get a lot of opportunities coming out of the backfield as a receiving option as Brady uses him to open up some deep opportunities later in the game. Tight end Scott Chandler has been a real find and a favorite of Buffalo quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. Expect that trend to continue as the surprising Bills travel to Cincinnati in a quest to go 4-0 to start the season. Quarterback Michael Vick and the Philadelphia Eagles have not lived up to expectations thus far. Vick also injured his non-throwing hand last week, but every report indicates he will play in Week 4. And I suspect the Eagles will be angry and take it out on the visiting San Francisco 49ers. It shouldn't matter that the Niners stayed in Ohio after last week's game to avoid traveling from California to Philly. They simply do not match up well against the Eagles. Look for Vick to have a breakout game. Wide receiver Denarius Moore was given the opportunity to play in Oakland due to injuries to Louis Murphy and Jacoby Ford. While both those guys may return in Week 4, it shouldn't matter. Moore has already shown that he's a favorite target of quarterback Jason Campbell, and for good reason. The guy has the best combo of speed, strength, and ability to go after the football among the Raiders receivers. In a game that should be a high-scoring affair, he should get plenty of passes thrown his direction when the Raiders host the Patriots. Jermichael Finley is off to a solid start after missing the final 11 games last season due to injury. He's just an added weapon in the Green Bay arsenal and an easy target for quarterback Aaron Rodgers. The Denver Broncos linebackers will have a tough time keeping up with Finley, which should put a lot of pressure on a banged-up secondary to try and cover him. As for the guys you might want to bench this week, we'll start with quarterback Joe Flacco. Last week, the Ravens beat up St. Louis in a bounce-back win following a surprising loss in Tennessee. But the Rams' defense is not quite the Jets. And this week, it's the Jets' defense that will be looking to recover following a loss in Oakland in which they didn't look very good. Expect this game to be close throughout as both offenses will have a tough time getting anything going. Running back Frank Gore was on the list last week and he's here again. Adding to his underachieving start to the season, he now apparently has a banged-up ankle to go with it. Gore could become a non-factor quickly as San Francisco is forced to rely on their lackluster passing game to keep up with Philadelphia. Quarterback Kyle Orton is next on the bench list. He tends to be a guy who puts up good fantasy numbers but fails to lead his team to wins. One reason is his lack of mobility. Well, that plays right into the hands of Dom Capers and the Green Bay defense. Orton may still be able to put up a 200-plus yard passing game, but look for several turnovers as well, never good in any scoring system that penalizes for fumbles lost and interceptions. Also on the list is Orton's teammate, running back Willis McGahee. 2 weeks ago, he had a solid game with over 100 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week, he was held to just 52 yards on 22 carries, and the last time he played against Green Bay, it was a full-blown disaster with 4 carries for -4 yards. Expect something in between the 52 yards and the -4 this time. Finally, running back Rashard Mendenhall is off to a slow start in Pittsburgh. The Steelers' offensive line is a big part of the problem, as injuries have made it difficult to form a cohesive unit thus far. Expect they're going to be tough for Mendenhall again this week in a matchup against Houston that may become an aerial affair early on. And in our final notes, remember to keep tabs on the weather in games where you might be hedging whether you want to start a player. Last week, for example, the Jacksonville-Carolina game turned into just a slosh fest that pretty well negated the passing attack for both sides. Even with Cam Newton's athleticism, the Panthers quarterback fell from over 400 yards passing in his first 2 games as a pro down to 158 in Week 3. And of course, that also meant that a receiver like Steve Smith was rendered largely useless in any fantasy leagues. That's it for this week's Score Sheet podcast. We'll be back next week with another fantasy football preview.